Hello, everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. Up first, hazardous warning graphics showing winter weather advisories here for the central western Arctic coast out for tonight and until tomorrow afternoon up in that area for winds gusting to 40, 45 miles an hour, reducing visibilities in blowing snow to about half mile or less at times, with wind chills in the 40 to 45 degree below zero range. And again, that's out through tonight and tomorrow into the afternoon hours tomorrow. And for the next area here, we've got winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories out for the eastern North Gulf Coast, Yakutat, all the way down to Dixon Entrance here, and that's for heavy snow to occur tonight and currently going on now and will continue tonight and through most of tomorrow into the afternoon anyway. Tomorrow afternoon could start to end down here tomorrow morning, but look for a significant amount of snow here over the next 24 hours, especially tonight for the southeast coast. Satellite imagery showing more moisture moving in. All this cloudiness here bringing snow to the entire southeast coast today from Dixon Entrance all the way up to Skagway, Haines, and along Klondike Highway, Juneau as well, and westward there to Yakutat. Starts tapering off here over the eastern North Gulf Coast, Cordova, and into the Copper River Basin, and pretty much ending over much of Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula for the most part today, kind of a gradual diminishing of whatever light snow was occurring. Mostly overnight last night and a few snow showers this morning. Starting to see a little bit of clearing showing up as well. Some clouds down around Kodiak, more clouds out here over the southwest interior areas, and a lot of another band of snow showers here moving eastward across the Pribilofs today, and a lot of clouds up over the north slope in the Arctic coast with snow, several inches falling in some locations up there. And earlier on, winds gusted over 50 miles an hour at Umiat Airfield on the north slope there. Otherwise, just a lot of loose clouds here over the interior, kind of breaking up as they move in. As you can see, the one band kind of disappears and then reforms here just north and northeast of Fairbanks. Yet another one back here over the Kobuk Valley. And out to the west, pretty good storm system out here. Just north of Shemya, or very close to the Shemya 2 area, in the front pushing increasing wind, rain, and snow in toward Adak this afternoon from the western Aleutians. And you can see that moving along quite nicely, kind of moving east-northeastward there, and we'll continue that direction tonight. Otherwise, we had some snow showers here, as we point out in the satellite, moving across the Bering Sea into the Pribilofs, another trough with areas of snow here over the southwest interior. Some snow showers all the way up to the western Alaska range, and they're pretty much over for most of south central Alaska here. The snow and blowing snow on the Arctic coast, dry with some clearing here over the central interior today, and then back into some light snow here over the eastern and southeast interior, and snow falling across the entire southeast coast all day long today. And that's expected to continue tonight and through Saturday as well. Starting to see some clearing here over the Gulf of Alaska, southern Cook Inlet, eventually Kodiak Island, and that northwest flow may drag some more shower activity into Kodiak Island, mainly on the Shelikof Strait side. Probably won't see too much on the eastern side of the island there. Areas of light snow, again, Kuskokwim Valley, the western Alaska range, and then this storm system keeps snow falling across all of the southeast coast through the night tonight. Areas of light snow possible still in the central interior, Tanana Valley, back into the Seward Peninsula area, and some blowing snow will be mostly on the Arctic coast, central and western Arctic coast. But good to get some blowing and drifting snow here in toward Kotzebue and across the Seward Peninsula. But just some snow shower conditions into Bristol Bay. That storm coming across the Bering Sea here pushing the snow into the Pribilofs with rain back to the west in the warmer air. And look for gale force winds, gusts to 50+ miles per hour into the central Aleutians tonight ahead of that frontal system. And then moving on to tomorrow, that low tracks eastward, pretty good clip there, moving into Bristol Bay, spreading snow chances back into Kodiak Island late in the afternoon, snow changing to snow showers for the Alaska Peninsula, but some pretty good west-northwest winds here for the Alaska Peninsula during the day tomorrow there on the south side of this low center with a pretty good gradient through there. A little bit of a break here for the central Aleutians, but moisture, rain, and snow moving in late in the day there for Adak and Atka with this warm front, and that will extend all the way back to Shimian at 2. And areas of snow possible again over the central northern interior, western Arctic coast. Continue to see those winds. Yeah, it looks like another surge coming down from the northwest there with that Arctic front, but drying out, high pressure here and downsloping flow off the Alaska range dries it out and clears it out. South central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, and the North Gulf Coast and the Copper River Basin starting to dry out. And again, snow continues, maybe becoming a little more showery in the afternoon with snowfall rates lessening in the afternoon, especially in the southern southeast coast. Then on Sunday, low pressure still off the coast there, so look for a chance of snow across all of the Panhandle once again on Sunday, and mostly sunny skies, Copper River Basin, clear skies, North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, may pick up some clouds in the Susitna Valley with any snow shower activity along and north of the Alaska Range there and toward the Fairbanks area, White Mountains up toward the Yukon River. But you can see pretty good high pressure here building into the Yukon Delta, centering over the Yukon Delta along the coast. And that's going to make for a pretty widespread area of clear skies, Bristol Bay right up across the Seward Peninsula and the Kotzebue Sound. And then that front still brings some blowing snow conditions to the Arctic coast and North Slope, maybe an inch of snow falling there. And out to the west, frontal system here pushing eastward, so look for more wet conditions with rain and snow into the Pribilofs, extending down into the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, periods of rain, showers behind this front with lighter winds over the western Aleutians areas there. And moving on to low temperatures tonight, 0 to 10 below for the Copper River Basin and 5 to 10 above for the Kuskokwim Valley. Otherwise, the Susitna Valley, 0 to 5 above for the lows tonight with a clearing expected, and mid-teens in toward northern Cook Inlet, Anchorage, Palmer, Eagle River, lower 20s Homer, upper 20s Kodiak Island, and the teens for the Bristol Bay area. Lows in the 20s for the southeast coast, followed by highs tomorrow, mid to upper 30s, warmest in the south over the Panhandle, but northern areas staying near or just below freezing, and North Gulf Coast, highs around 30, 32 or so in the 20s, south central Alaska, lower teens for the Copper River Basin areas, and out to the west, Kuskokwim Valley, looking at highs tomorrow in the lower 20s, and mid to upper 20s for Bristol Bay, mid 30s though for Kodiak Island, followed by lows Sunday morning, much colder temperatures with the clear skies and higher pressure building in, so call it 5 to 15 below in the Copper River Basin and about the same there in the Kuskokwim Valley, and south central Alaska anywhere from 10 below in the Susitna Valley to 5 above here for most of the Kenai Peninsula, mid-teens for Homer, single numbers Bristol Bay, lower 20s for Kodiak Island, and lows 15 to 20 northern Panhandle, 25 to 30 down to the south, followed by highs. Not much, about 35 for the southern southeast coast and upper 20s, lower 30s to the north there, including Yakutat. Highs about 10 degrees for the Copper River Basin. In the teens for the high temperatures on Sunday for south central Alaska, Susitna, Manuska Valley, lower 30s Kodiak Island, and 5 to 15 for Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Valley. Up to the north, looking at lows tonight, 0 to 5 above for the central interior. Near zero here toward the Brooks Range, except 5 to 15 below Arctic Village to Fort Yukon. About the same for the North Slope and Arctic Coast, falling back below zero for St. Lawrence Island. Highs tomorrow, teens, central interior, single numbers to the Brooks Range, maybe a little below zero, and 0 to 10 above on the eastern Arctic Coast, colder back here to the west. And then for the lows on Sunday morning, everybody below zero, anywhere from 20 to 30 below, maybe 35 below in some areas here for the northern interior to the North Slope, Arctic coast, and 5 to 10 below for the Bering Strait, followed by highs getting up to near 0 to 5 above for the greater Fairbanks area over toward Eagle. See the 0-degree isotherm right through here. To the north, below zero, out toward St. Lawrence Island. For the southwest coast, lows tonight, teens, lower 20s, otherwise near freezing for the Aleutians, followed by highs near 40 in the Aleutians, mid-30s for the Pribilofs, and following lows in the 20s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Saturday morning's fire weather graphic, or fire weather. Flying weather graphic here. IFR, that front coming across the Bering Sea into the Pribilofs, and some of that reaching the Yukon Delta coast there on Cape Romanzoff, possibly by early in the morning, otherwise marginal VFR here. Into the western interior Seward Peninsula, some more IFR. South of the Brooks Range over the northern interior valleys, all the way down here and across the Talkeetnas to the Matanuska Valley, and then over toward the border. Better conditions here, Kuskokwim Valley and Kodiak Island, VFR, North Gulf Coast as well. And starting to improve here over the northern panhandle. We'll see by afternoon, the IFR just about gone. Marginal VFR over the southern areas with VFR along the central and north coast, Glacier Bay, North Gulf Coast. Most of southern Alaska here east of the Alaska Range and south of the mountains as well, VFR for the afternoon. And then some IFR slipping on up towards Sitkinak there, Kodiak Island, and up across the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol, Togiak Bay areas. But pretty good here over the northern Bering into the Yukon Delta there, Seward Peninsula, southern Seward Peninsula, the Bering Strait VFR. Lingering IFR up there over the western North Slope, western Brooks Range. And a band of VFR here coming right across the eastern Aleutians. And then the next batch of IFR out there to the west. That advances north and eastward for the morning hours Sunday, coming right into False Pass there, just almost up to St. George Island, and then covering the west central Aleutians. Northern Bering Sea, pretty good VFR there. Most of the western interior VFR, as well as the west coast up into the Chukchi Sea. But central areas and looks like some IFR possible north side of the Alaska Range or Tanana Valley of the White Mountains. But good VFR, southern Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, and into the Panhandle. Still some lower conditions over the southern areas, and we'll see by afternoon that pretty much all goes away. Mostly VFR for the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast here, as well as right up to the Alaska Range, Tanana Valley, marginal VFR with clouds all the way up to the Arctic coast there in North Slope. West side here, really good. Northern Bering Sea, same thing, nothing but VFR down into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. Huge area of IFR now forming over the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea, slipping on down to the Alaska Peninsula. Passes for tomorrow, Saturday, Anahtuvik and Adigan, occasionally marginal for both passes on either approach, and Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR tomorrow. VFR also in the forecast for rainy and windy, looks a little marginal throughout the day. But Isabel should be VFR, and Mintesta VFR, as well as Tanita, a really good day for that pass. Matanuska Valley, solid VFR tomorrow with Portage, also VFR on either entrance. And for Chilcoot White, VFR, especially in the afternoon hours through the evening and into Sunday. Freezing levels right over St. Paul, St. George Island, down across the Alaska Peninsula, just south of Kodiak, and near or just south of the North Gulf Coast. And still just to the west of the Panhandle there, 2,000 feet down over the Queen Charlotte Islands, as well as south of the Aleutians here. So moving on to icing, we've got some warm front type icing, which usually means isolated moderate rime icing here coming into the central and western Aleutian areas, southwest Bering Sea, and then also here along the southwest coast, Yukon Kuskokwim Delta coast, maybe up into Bethel, Bristol Bay, starting to encroach on southwest Kodiak Island. Otherwise, another area, the third area here over the central and southern southeast coast, this will be kind of mostly a mixed light icing type of situation. Heaviest over the southern areas and all tending to diminish from north to south. And the jet stream, southwest 115 knots into British Columbia, so south of the Panhandle there. And out over the Bering Sea, we've got west to northwest winds, 165 to 170 knots there. And coming down to 9,000 feet, 85 knot westerlies along the Aleutians, 45 to 50 knot winds over the interior, 3,000 feet. Northerly winds turning northwest at 60 to 65 knots across eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. 70 knot winds coming into the far western Aleutians. Pretty light over the interior. A little more of a breeze there out of the west for the North Slope areas. And for turbulence, moderate chop. Big area here over western Alaska. Actually, moderate turbulence there. Prince William Sound, all of the Aleutians, and the Alaska Peninsula.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. He is here and has been here many times to talk to us about weather satellites and how those can help Alaskans understand our weather, how we can do better detection, keep more people safe from things even like volcanic ash. But today, Eric, you're going to talk to us a little bit more about weather satellites and how that can keep Alaskans safe and protect our property from wildfire. Right?
That's right, Dave. Today's topic is where there's smoke, there's fire. And thanks for having us back again to Alaska
Anytime.
Weather. Well, weather satellites have a lot of different instruments on them. It turns out that the electromagnetic spectrum has a lot going on in it, and only one part of that is visible light, what we see.
Right.
Weather satellites, of course, report that. Today's topic is wildfires.
Okay.
There are some people who say that in Alaska in the summertime you don't have severe weather. These people are usually from Oklahoma or somewhere, and F5 tornadoes tend not to occur in Alaska.
Right.
People have also said what we do have in the summer. What is Alaska's severe summer weather? Can be hydrology,
right,
flash flood and erosion in the mountains and things like that, and fires, wildfires.
Absolutely.
Those were here in 2004, certainly remember that. We've got an example here from 2014. Now it was a quiet season overall, but in May, down on the Kenai Peninsula, we had a wildfire on the Funny River, and this is a satellite image from a polar orbiter that went right over Alaska, and we can see the plume of smoke coming out of that fire on the Kenai, curling down. It's caught in the wind. It goes down toward Kodiak Island, curves around. You can see it circulating around a low-pressure system that's in the Gulf of Alaska.
It was a beautiful picture.
Oh, my gosh.
Except there was a fire.
There's a fire there. The nice thing is with this satellite image, you can tell where the fire origin is, where the smoke is coming from. And it's a color image. We're looking at the wavelength spectrum of about 0.4 to 0.7 micrometers or microns. That's what the human eye would see. If you were riding on the satellite and look down, you could see this kind of an image.
Right.
So that's pretty nice. But it turns out there's more to the electromagnetic spectrum than just visible light.
Okay.
You've heard of infrared, ultraviolet, that kind of thing. If we move into longer wavelengths, let's go to one specifically, 3.7 microns.
Okay, 3.7.
Why worry about that one?
Okay.
Well, we've got an example here. 3.7, it turns out, happens to be very sensitive to a certain temperature range, temperatures where fires burn.
Okay.
And so we've got an example zoomed in a little more from that same Funny River fire down on the Kenai Peninsula, and we can see that you get up into a few hundred degrees Fahrenheit, and that's where the colors are. We can see there on the Funny River fire to the west and to the east, almost a horseshoe shape there, is not only we're seeing where the fire is in a general sense, but specifically where it's the active fire.
That is where it's burning right now.
And it's 3.7 microns is the important temperature there.
Okay.
That's right.
So this is really important to firefighters on the ground, people that are making plans and directing the firefighters on where they need to go and cut the trenches and keep people safe.
You know it.
Wow.
If you want to fight that fire, you got to know where it is.
Okay.
You got to know the leading edge. We've also got a movie loop, nothing quite like animating it in time.
Yeah.
You can see the fire spreading out over time with a succession of film or a succession of images. Now this is one channel, 3.7 micron. You know, we looked at that color smoke image before, and that's actually a red, a green, and a blue. That's how you get color imagery. What if you took 3 different wavelengths in the infrared? You went from like 2 2.2 micron, 1.5 micron, up to 3.7. You mix them together, you get this other kind of color image, which is even a better way to sharply bring out the details of where that leading edge of the fire is.
Okay.
You'll note, though, in the infrared, guess what? We don't see the smoke. That's too bad. And on these movie loops, you can see the clouds go by. These channels can't see through clouds. The lesson is there's no one perfect solution. You got to have the visible, you got to have some of that infrared single 3.7 channel, some of the infrared mixing to help get a different perspective. Another one, we've talked before about a fun channel called the day-night band.
Yes, one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, and in Alaska in the winter, it's great. We got all this darkness. The day-night band is so sensitive to seeing light. You can see features that otherwise aren't available. Now in Alaska, when you have a forest fire, it tends to be light out all the time. It's our summer. But we can go down south to the Rim Fire in California in 2013. Now, okay, it was in California, not Alaska, but Alaskan crews went down to fight that fire, so we can talk about it here on Alaska Weather. Here we have a 3.7 micron channel shot of the Rim Fire, again, kind of a horseshoe shape, showing that active fire front down there. And then we'll look again to the day-night band, the visible light, and then you can see how the fire is all bright. You can see the active fire front, and actually the city lights over there too. Turns out that the cities, while they're active in a social sense, are not really hot in a fire sense. So they don't show up in the 3.7 micron. They're not hot like a fire is, but the fire in the cities look the same from a visible light perspective. And a fun thing here too is that we can see the smoke plume going north from the Rim Fire on the day-night band. So if we were ever to have, like in 2004 in Alaska, you get dark at night, we still had an active fire season that year. That was that really bad year. The day-night band didn't exist then, but if we had fires now in August, we could use it then. The lesson here is weather satellites, they offer many different wavelengths of light. Some are used for different purposes, and some of these that we just looked at tonight are especially helpful here in Alaska to find and to track the behavior of these wildfires so the crews can go out there and do their jobs.
Sure. So a satellite toolbox for the firefighting crews and the fire weather forecasters, and it just underlines how important satellites are, especially for Alaska and our mission for the National Weather Service to protect life and property, and also to enhance the national economy. So wonderful stuff there, Eric. And people can look at pictures like this anytime by going to gina.alaska.edu. You'll find images there all around Alaska at various times of the year, and not just about fire weather, but volcanic ash and smoke and anything else you want to check out. They're always beautiful pictures and always interesting to look at no matter what time of the day. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We appreciate it and welcome you back anytime. For this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. See you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
West winds 30 knots along the south coast for the day Saturday. Seas about 15 feet. North coast about the same. Westerlies 25 to 30 knots. And Lynn Canal, north winds 15 knots with 3-foot seas. Clarence Strait, south winds at 20 knots. And Stevens Passage, south winds 15 knots. And then for the day on Sunday, south coast, westerlies 20 to 25 knots. And east-northeast winds at 20 knots for the north coast. Northern inner channels, Lynn Canal, north winds 20 knots, 4-foot seas. Stevens Passage, northeast winds at 20 knots. And a light south wind at 15 knots for Clarence Strait. Moving to the west there for Prince William Sound, northwest 25 knots for the day Saturday. And North Gulf Coast here, northwesterlies 30 to 35 knots, seas a little over 10 feet. Good gales for the Barren Islands, northwest at 45 knots with 14-foot seas. And west winds 40 knots for Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisory, southern Cook Inlet, northwest winds 30 knots, light variable winds north of the Forelands. And for the day on Sunday, north to northeast wind 10 to 15 knots for Cook Inlet. Gale warnings continue for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands for northwesterlies at 35 to 40 knots. And for the North Gulf Coast, looks like north winds at about 25 knots from the north and northwest, and then north winds at 20 knots for Prince William Sound with 3-foot seas. And for Shelikof Strait, Saturday, west winds 25 knots. Otherwise, Kodiak Island looking at gale force northwesterlies up to 40 knots. Gale warnings for sure here for the Alaska Peninsula, southwest 45 knots there, 22 to 25-foot seas. And Bristol Bay, southwesterlies at 20 knots. And for Sunday, south winds 25 knots, Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, Pacific side, southwest at 30, and west-northwest winds for Kodiak Island, 30 to 40 knots. Bristol Bay, north winds at 30 knots with 10-foot seas. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, west-southwest winds 40 to 50 knots, and for Adak and Atka, westerlies 35 to 40 knots, and the western Aleutians west-southwest winds 35 to 40 knots. And for the day on Sunday, from Kiska to Shemya, north winds 40 knots, south winds 45 knots for Amchitka Island, gale warnings for the central Aleutians, southerlies up to 45 knots there. And for the eastern Aleutians, gale warnings, south winds 35 to 40 knots. For the southwest coast tomorrow, for the Yukon Delta coast, east winds at 20 knots, but the Kuskokwim Delta coast south at 30. West winds 40 knots for the Pribilos with seas at 20 feet. North winds 25 knots St. Matthew Island. And for St. Lawrence Island, winds will be northwest at 15 knots. For Sunday, St. Lawrence Island, looking at southwest winds at about 15 knots. Otherwise, Yukon Delta coast, east winds there at 30 knots, and gale warnings for the St. Matthew Island area, east winds at 35 knots. Small craft advisories for the Kuskokwim Delta coast with a northeast wind at 30 knots there. Pribilofs, gale warnings, southeast winds 35 knots with 15-foot seas. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, west winds 20 to 25 knots. Southwest winds 25 for the central coast, and the western Arctic coast, winds will be west at 25 knots. And for the Wales to Cape Thompson area, west winds at 20 knots. And for the day Sunday, 15 to 20 knot winds here for the Chukchi Sea and central and western Arctic coast. Brisk wind advisories continue, westerlies at 25 knots, and brisk wind advisories also for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for west-southwest winds at 25 knots. For tonight, snow, heavy at times for the Panhandle all the way back to Yakutat. Not too bad, south central Alaska. Maybe some lingering snow showers, Talkeetnas along the Alaska Range, areas of snow up over the northwest interior. And the next system here, pushing eastward across the Bering Sea, will bring rain and gusty winds with it, with areas of snow in advance of the warm front, pushing in toward the Pribilofs. A little bit of a break here along the southwest coast. And tomorrow, that low tracks right into northern Bristol Bay, so areas of snow here from the Yukon Delta down across the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, pushing in toward Kodiak Island in the afternoon. Mostly clear, dry conditions, south central Alaska with pretty light winds. Snow continues, but starts to become a little more showery and more intermittent in the afternoon for the Panhandle. And then for the day on Sunday, high pressure. Look at all the clear skies here from the Noatak Valley all the way down to Bristol Bay and the southwest coast, in across southern Alaska. Some gusty winds, Resurrection Bay, for example, Kodiak Island, otherwise pretty nice, but colder.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.